the $8.9 billion takeover for Crown by the US investment bank Blackstone. Got a green light from the Crown board. So I sat down with Crown's chief executive, Steve McCann, earlier today. Steve McCann, many thanks for your time. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way.
Thanks, Ross. And you too.
Yeah, thank you. There's obviously a lot of love in the Crown boardroom to have agreed to this deal from Blackstone. What was the final tipping point to make them say yes?
Well, I can assure you the fact that it was Valentine's Day didn't come into our thinking. But look, we've been considering the approach from Blackstone for some time, obviously. It was almost a year ago when the first approach was made. And we've had regard to Crown's underlying value, the value of our assets, they're fantastic assets, and where we think the business can get to in assessing the value that we think is appropriate for shareholders. So I was really trying to get to a level where we thought it was appropriate to put it in front of shareholders. And then in terms of the scheme implementation deed, which we've now signed, that's quite an extensive document that goes into a range of preconditions for the transaction itself. Regulatory approval is clearly one of the bigger conditions that Blackstone needs to meet, but assuming that's achieved, then we'll put this to shareholders for a vote, hopefully in the second quarter this year.
So what is it that's happened in the past 12 months that allowed you to convince Blackstone that it should pay an extra $800 million plus for Crown and its assets? What happened to actually make them raise the bid by that much?
Yeah, I think it does come down to what is the true value of the organisation. So at a different point in time, Crown has obviously traded in a fairly volatile manner, reflecting the circumstances that we've been in. COVID's obviously had a very significant effect on the hospitality industry, and when Crown's doors are shut, it's losing money. So that was having a material impact on the share price, and we've had a number of regulatory inquiries to work through. All of those things collectively have suppressed our share price to levels below what really represents true value. So our view at the time that Blackstone first approached was that it wasn't a compelling offer to put to shareholders, and we needed to work hard to demonstrate to Blackstone that the underlying value of the business really was materially higher, and they accept that.
Okay, and one of the key conditions that Blackstone has put in place is that there is no further regulatory issues that Crown has to confront. That's an important one, isn't it?
Yeah, there are degrees. So we've gone into some detail as to what might trigger a potential out for Blackstone from the transaction. There are things that we're still waiting on. So, for example, the outcome of the Perth Casino Royal Commission. So cancellation of our licence in Perth, for example, would be a significant event that would have a material impact on our business. So things like that we need to assess along the way. Hopefully that won't occur, but we've worked hard to get to a position with Blackstone where we think we can provide a fairly high degree of certainty for shareholders.
You, of course, don't speak in any way for the major shareholder of Crown, Consolidated Press Holdings, although the Victorian Royal Commission and the government have already put into place a mechanism by which he will have to sell down from 37% to 5%. Do you get any sense as to where Consolidated Press Holdings and James Packer sit in all of this?
So we've spoken to a number of shareholders and obviously reached out to try and get an assessment of how the offer would be considered. In the context of CPH, they have an advisor here, Moelis, who we've spoken to on a number of occasions. I think they actually publicly came out and said that they were encouraged by the proposal at $13.10 when it was first tabled. So we have no reason to believe that they think it's not a good offer to consider, but they'll have to consider it in the fullness of time prior to the vote and make their own decision as to whether they should vote in favour, as do all other shareholders. As
the Chief Executive of Crown, though, do you feel a sense of regret even for James Packer that, say, this casino here, he's built this, this has almost been his legacy to Australia, and yet he will not be the shareholder when ultimately the gaming floors are open, that ultimately this will be left behind from his point of view?
Yeah, look, I can't speak for James Packer, obviously, and how he would see all of this. What I can say is this building that we're in is quite extraordinary, and very few people would have invested the sort of capital into this hotel that has been invested to make this an incredible asset for Sydney. So I think that we should give credit where credit's due in that regard.
One of the things they would have had to have taken into account in buying Crown or making this bid, which has now been agreed, is whether the gaming floor here and when it actually opens in Crown Sydney Again, this has been something that's been, well, it's coming in a month's time, it's coming in a couple of months' time, it's still not happened. Is there a sense as to when it occurs?
I will avoid trying to put a date on it because no doubt I'll end up being wrong. Safer to say we're getting closer. What I can say is that we're working very constructively with ILGA through the outstanding issues that would enable us to open, and we're making very good progress. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to announce a target opening date soon.
And so if it is agreed by the shareholders and the regulators also allow it to come through, just tell me, when is the final date that ultimately Blackstone, you imagine, would own Crown in Australia?
Likely to be mid-May in the absence of any unforeseen delays.
Steve McCann, many thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Ross.